Well, it's all very fascinating the way psychedelics work on the brain. So what we think is that you can, profoundly change a person's perspective of the world, their life and death, and sort of help people kind of break down this kind of concept of ego. And that's what we sort of find when people talk about what happens to them. They often change career, their relationships change, and it's kind of a profound change in the way that people experience life.
Welcome to the Mindfulness Experience Podcast. My name is Keith Fiveson. On this show, I had the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Justin Hanka, who is the co-founder and chief executive officer at MindBio Therapeutics. They're a biotechnology company dedicated to transforming mental health care through psychedelic medicine, specifically using LSD microdosing. He's got over 20 years of experience in business and leadership. He's a real innovator, and he's got a lot of passion for using the science to create solutions for unsolved problems in healthcare. I think you're going to enjoy this show. He's an advocate for mental health awareness. I met him at the Microdose Wonderland conference. I was intrigued with the offering, and I invited him onto the show. So I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I certainly did. Welcome, Justin Hanka. Hey. I am here with Justin Hanka, who's the CEO and the co-founder of MindBio Therapeutics. Hey, Justin, what's up? What is happening, man? What's up?
Well, I'm back in Melbourne after an epic trip to Wonderland in Miami a couple of weeks ago, and I've only just recovered, so it's probably an appropriate time. My voice is back to normal, and we're right back into the swing of things. I'm very excited about what we're doing with this work.
Well, Justin, I understand. I was there at Wonderland with you, and I have spent a week or two recovering as well. But you have a huge trip. You're in Australia, right?
Yeah, that's right. Right down in Melbourne, in Australia. So we're just about as far away from everything to do with psychedelics that you can be. We're quite isolated here, and it's just terrific to kind of integrate with the community, and certainly what's going on in the US is very exciting, and it's just terrific to be a part of it.
Well, Justin, you were nice enough to invite me as a part of the press to the MindBio Therapeutic press conference. And, we're all about the mindfulness experience on the show. So I'm wondering, what is, and you were at the psychedelic conference, one of the largest psychedelic conferences in the world. So what is MindBio Therapeutics? I mean, it certainly sounds like it's about the mind, and it's about the body, the biosphere of the body. But then we bring in the therapeutic elements. What are you guys all about?
Well, we're a clinical stage sort of biotechnology company, but really we're here to sort of change the course of mental health treatments. And what's exciting to us is this kind of new science that we're finding in psychedelic research. And certainly what's fascinated me about psychedelic medicines is their profound impact on thinking and cognition and mood. And we really want to get to the bottom of the science here. Our scientific thesis is in microdosing. So we're interested in small doses of psychedelic medicines and the effect on the brain and the mind, and certainly we're interested in treating these debilitating mental health conditions that are really affecting us all over the world.
Now, you're talking about psychedelics, but you're talking about a specific kind of psychedelic. I mean, you're really bringing back LSD and the kind of work that really started it all off with Timothy Leary. Can you talk about that from the viewpoint of, what are some of the challenges when you're looking at facing psychedelic therapies like LSD?
Well, yeah, actually, it goes well before Timothy Leary. So Albert Hofmann in the late 1930s discovered LSD accidentally in the laboratory, and he was working for Sandoz. And then it was only a few years later that he realized that it had this profound impact on thinking and mood and cognition. and when he ingested a dose of it. And so
Mm-hmm.
after that kind of experience, the LSD was swept out into the community. It was used broadly in scientific research, in psychiatry, in psychiatric hospitals, and it was available to researchers all over the world. But it was banned in the sort of the war on drugs, unfortunately, in the 70s.
And Timothy Leary is the guy that really brought it to the consciousness of the public, and I think it's through that, recreational use that it became, certainly popular, and certainly started the period where suddenly, tuning in, turning on, and dropping out was not a good thing, right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because obviously, they knew what was going on. It was affecting people in a positive way, and so unfortunately, that message was not sort of appropriate for the times, and the recreational use of things got out of control. But unfortunately, the banning of these substances just stopped this wonderful research. And what we find, fast forward 50 years, we're doing this research and we're finding, we're understanding the impact on the brain, what it's actually doing in the brain. What fascinates me mostly about these substances is this concept of neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, and the kind of induces the rewiring of the brain's natural ability to kind of rewire itself. And so, that scientific process is really fascinating, and that's what we're getting down to with our sort of clinical trials.
Now, looking at neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, I've just recently read something around the use of LSD and other psychedelics in terms of working with Alzheimer's and working with individuals to help reverse some of the aging process. So tell me a little bit about these therapies or the research that you're doing and some of the potential benefits of using LSD from a microdosing viewpoint in terms of the therapies from, the research that you've done.
Yeah, well, here's the thing about microdosing. We've kind of known a lot about it for decades because people have been doing it recreationally. And so there's a lot of grey literature around, and there's some just scattered science on the subject, but it hasn't been sort of confirmatory that microdosing does anything. A lot of conjecture about whether microdosing is actually a placebo or expectancy effect. So we've just completed a world first phase 1 clinical trial, microdosing LSD. And what we've found is that it is not an expectancy effect, it is not a placebo effect. We can see that sort of from the psychometric point of view, that people who microdose LSD on dose day are substantially elevated in certain psychometric factors, in factors such as energy and creativity, social connectivity, feelings of wellness and happiness. And that information and data is very exciting because we haven't seen that before. We haven't been able to prove that to the appropriate scientific standard. So we now have the data.
So how do you select the conditions and the target about the research? What goes into that in terms of that research and getting those kinds of results? Because that's very that's very important in terms of the benefits that you've just outlined.
Yeah, absolutely. So the science here is it's pure discovery, really. So this is a very large safety study of microdoses of LSD, and so we're really just kind of trying to break down everything from a dozen psychometric tests right down into the DNA and blood tests and so forth to find out what it's actually doing to the brain, what's going on in the brain, and happening to people when they microdose LSD. And we can see already from the data that we have that these profound changes in mood are appropriate for treating depression and sort of mood disorders. And so when you go and talk about kind of this concept of neuroplasticity and will it help people with brain injury and other brain diseases and conditions of the brain, well, there's certainly potential for it. We don't really, the science is not quite there yet, but certainly with the data we have, we hope to sort of dig deeper on these issues.
So I understand that there is a inhibiting some of the reuptake receptors in the brain in terms of serotonin and dopamine, and certainly with a lot of, like with MDMA, that's certainly the case. With psilocybin, that's certainly the case. But from the viewpoint of really what goes on in the brain, what is happening that really is helping with this neurogenesis and helping individuals, to rewire? I mean, a lot of this is we've been studying this, as you say, back in the 30s, and I know from a psychiatry viewpoint, certainly during the 30s, 40s, 50s, and then at the beginning of the 60s, there was a lot of research and a lot of work that's been done. Do you have any insight in terms of what's really going on for individuals, with the brain itself? I don't want to get too deep in this, obviously, but there is something happening that really helps individuals to be present to some, areas of the brain that may not be accessible to them during normal daylight hours, if you will, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, the science is complex in this regard, but certainly what we know from a neurogenesis perspective is that, and we see this in both microdosing and macrodosing models, is that basically new dendrites are growing and sort of new neural connections are forming in the brain, which is why we think that when people take these substances, they're able to kind of learn new behaviors and new models of thinking. And that's really exciting for the research, but the science is still very early in this regard. And certainly there's a different impact on the brain, and whether you're taking a macrodose or a microdose. Certainly we've only just looked at the top line data in microdosing of LSD. We're going to go right down into the bloods and the DNA and the mRNA and so forth to truly understand what's happening in the brain and to what extent is neurogenesis occurring. So we'll have that data. We haven't analysed that. We haven't gone that far yet. We'll be looking at the phase 1 results for 18 months. We'll be well into phase 2 clinical trials, and we'll be still analysing the data.
This is it's very exciting when you start thinking about it, the ability to go ahead and expand the neural network of the brain and go ahead and gain greater consciousness. So what is the goal of the clinical research in psychedelics? What's the ultimate goal of of MindBio Therapeutics, if you will?
Yeah, we have a microdosing thesis so that our first target candidate drug is LSD. My wish list really with this research is discovery, first discovery, and then look at the treatment. So we want to understand as much as we can about what's going on in the body and the brain, so that we can target treatments using these substances. And so our thesis, sort of with running our business as well, is that we've collaborating with some world-leading academics who run the research independently, and we're running that sort of rigorous sort of scientific process out of the University of Auckland in New Zealand. It's a real healthy collaboration between a corporate, the academic science, and also the interests of the governments who are interested in changing the course of mental health. So our aim really is to just keep progressing the science and to create a treatment that we can get out to the masses. We believe that microdosing lends itself to treatment that we can get out to and so that we can scale in the community, because really microdosing is not interruptive. It doesn't interrupt a person's day, and they can take the medicine in the same way they can take any other medicine and get on with their day, as opposed to macrodosing, where it's a much more profound experience. There's a lot of integration that goes on in the clinics before and after, and that's a different experience, and we're supportive of those experiences, and we understand they're profound. Microdosing has a different role to play, we believe, a very important role. But the first role that we're doing is discovery. That's what we do with this clinical research. I'm fascinated by it. The scientists are fascinated by it. And the other aspect of what we're doing in our organisation is this is a marathon to get treatments out. I think there's a lot more to learn about, or we can learn about psychedelics than just from the drug itself. And what we're hearing from people who take these drugs and the profound experiences they have, it's really transforming and saving people's lives. And those messages, I think, are very healthy. So we've chosen in our organisation to amplify those messages, to send out a good, positive message about mental health and to play that role in the community.
So, I have you tried LSD yourself?
No, I would be the only founder of a psychedelics company, I think, that hasn't actually tried a psychedelic medicine. And so I've been asked this, I've been offered it, I get offered it all over the world when I'm traveling, but no, I haven't. But I have been romanced by what it does and what it is, and I find it fascinating. I can see myself someday in a retreat in Peru, having some experience. That's the kind of experience I'm interested in. But really, I think my role here is I'm an investment banker by trade, and I've fallen in love with the science of psychedelics, which is why I'm putting my face to it, and I'm driving this strong message. I think I've got a role to play, and certainly it's an interesting role when I actually haven't tried the substance.
Right. Well, it's sort of like selling Kool-Aid without trying the Kool-Aid, right? And I use that as an example. I have tried LSD. As a matter of fact, I owe my whole career to LSD. I did several LSD trips when I was living on a hippie commune back in the 70s. Imagine that, Justin, taking a look at me that I was living on a hippie commune, huh? But needless to say, on my last trip, I decided that I needed to join the Army. So I went from one commune to another commune and went into telecommunications, and that became my whole career. So I owe my whole career in communications to LSD and my trip. And of course, I've had several journeys along the way, but I think there's something there. What impact could psychedelics have on mental health treatments from your viewpoint, given what you're doing at MindBio Therapeutics?
Well, it's all very fascinating the way psychedelics work on the brain. So what we think is that it can, profoundly change a person's perspective of the world, their life and death, and sort of help people kind of break down this kind of concept of ego. And that's what we sort of find when people talk about what happens to them. They often change career, their relationships change, and it's kind of a profound change in the way that people experience life. And as I said, I actually haven't experienced it myself, but I've found that running a company like this, I hear stories like you've just told me every day. We have people sort of reaching out to us for treatments.
I mean, it was I have to, Justin, it was really like a God moment. It was the ineffable. It was the ability to really recognize that I had so much more to do with my life than to just be on this commune, which was wonderful. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it really opened my mind, but there are these opportunities to go ahead and deal with trauma. I had loads of trauma, loads of things to work on. So what you're saying to me is kind of like music to my ears. When we met, I was like, oh, well, no one is doing this. How many other companies are doing LSD? Research specifically around microdosing. I didn't see many other companies at this conference here. Justin, tell me.
No, there are a few LSD studies going on around the world, but obviously this is quite unique. This is a unique LSD study in that we've had the approvals from the government to give LSD in microdoses in 2-week lots out in the community. And so it was quite interesting what happened. We can say what happens when you give people LSD, 2 weeks of LSD. They adhere to the protocol. So 100% of the people gave themselves 100% of the doses. There was no divergence of substances. There was no abuse. There was no misuse of it. And the data that we're collecting is very interesting because every day they report in, they run a whole lot of psychometric tests. There's a lot of quantitative and also qualitative data here. And so the qualitative information is interesting. We're running speech analytics across post-treatment interviews. And the way that people are talking about this, even in microdosing, we're quite surprised. LSD is longer acting at the receptor in the brain than psilocybin. That's why we chose LSD to start with. We thought, that this makes sense, and certainly what the microdosing community was saying about microdosing LSD made sense. And so our scientists just set out to prove that thesis that microdoses were reporting feeling sharper and more creative, and the scientists wanted to know why. And my role in that was really to just fund it and get it funded. And my discovery process has been quite wonderful, really. I've built an incredible relationship with academics around the world who are curious about this as I am.
So one of the things I'm reading here is certainly a part of the whole area of microdosing, I want to ask you a question, because the claim is certainly a variety. It can deal with a variety of issues, including depression, anxiety, and chronic pain. And I'm wondering, as you start doing these, trials and you start working with the government, what are the challenges that the company faces when exploring, LSD therapies and the microdosing of LSD as you start moving forward in your development? What are the challenges?
Yeah, so the challenge is really, I guess it starts with the, kind of the regulatory challenges that we have. So we've been able to deal that in the jurisdiction of New Zealand. It's still a Schedule 1 substance there. And so we have to deal with that issue and this perception that these drugs, these medicines are subject to misuse and abuse and have no medical utility. That is clearly not the case, and we're proving that. I think for me, personally on this issue, we're about to run a phase 2A, which is an open label in depression. And so if I start to see the same responses that we've seen in the phase 1 trials on mood in depressed patients, if we see elevations in creativity, elevations in energy and happiness and feelings of wellness, I think certainly my interest will be to lobby the governments harder for special access. Because once we have the data, you cannot argue with good data, right? If it's good and it's solid and the scientific processes are followed. So I think the first challenge is the regulatory challenge. The second challenge is also stigma. So to be honest with you, completely sort of transparent, when I started this 3 years ago, I raise money and I'm a banker, right? So I walk up and down financial districts talking to people about investments, and I talk to investors, and that's my job. Before I sort of became the front man of a psychedelics company, I was quite concerned about what people might think about psychedelics, and I was quite worried about it. And certainly we have found along the journey that certain types of investors won't go near it. However, I think that's changing. So I think there's the stigma we have to deal with. I think what COVID has done to us and the mental health crisis is certainly helping. Because the current treatments don't work. Even the governments are saying that. New Zealand government said the reason the New Zealand government gave our clinical trials over $2 million of subsidies. And the reason for those subsidies they gave is that they said, we're doing this because the current treatments are not working in the way that we'd expect them to.
So wait a second, Justin. Here you are. You're an investment banker. You raise money. This is what you do. You seem to be, you're the kind of guy that seems rock solid. And certainly you haven't yet tried LSD. And here you are. You're in a company that's dealing with a Schedule 1 substance, and you're looking to go ahead and develop that through these trials and so on. What inspired you to find, the founding of MindBio Therapeutics? What was the impetus to that? I mean, it sounds to me like you were in a pretty secure environment, and here you are, you're involved with LSD. What's happening, man? What's up?
Well, it's really surprised me, to be frank with you. It's and I've fallen in love with the prospect of what psychedelics can do for people, and this just appears to me to be something very, very good to do, and I'm driven by that purpose and really nothing else. We've obviously raised a lot of money from investors who are supporting us. They love our business, they love our methodology, they're getting behind our message. So I think psychedelics have a lot more to teach us than just the drug itself. These experiences that people report, I think we can learn from those things. Certainly, if we're going to change mental health, it's not just drugs. It's going to do a whole lot more about the way we care for ourselves and each other, and also the way we're looking after the environment. And these are all sorts of things that come up in psychedelics. So things that I've learned, it's complete discovery for me. The community of people that's transformed their lives. And I've become, I think, a platform to kind of amplify that message in a different environment. And certainly, we're just being encouraged by the support we've got for the message. So it's been quite interesting. It's been a real journey, Keith, to be frank with you.
Yeah, well, certainly, and being an ambassador to the financial community and really understanding that, I think that's very, very, very helpful. How long do you think it'll be before psychedelics become more widely accepted as a form of medical treatment?
Well, I think we've got a ways to go
Mm-hmm.
to get to that point. However, the opening of those gates will be with the approval of the MAPS treatment for PTSD using MDMA. And that wonderful, terrific work that Rick Doblin and all the MAPS organisation have done, that real pioneering work, will be probably the most transformative thing that's ever happened.
Which is what? Still a year, 2 years away, right?
Yeah, that's right.
According to him, yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So that's I truly believe that that will be the transformative moment for the approvals, and will open the doors for the rest of the science, which is still well behind. We're starting 2 phase 2 trials. We think depression this will be a transformative treatment for depression. But we're still years away. But I think the special access schemes will certainly open up once the MAPS organisation goes live with these substances and they're out in the community. I think that will open special access around the world. In Australia, you can't even access ketamine for depression.
And it's certainly legal here. And from a clinical viewpoint, the military is really helping to go ahead and spearhead the funding and the treatment, which, as we well know, it's supported by both sides of the government, on the Republicans and the Democrats. They've just actually formed a committee to go ahead and start to fast track some of these treatments as well. Do you see a future where psychedelics might be a part of the mainstream form of treatment?
Absolutely, yeah. The data we have and the endpoints we're seeing in the science is progressing at a really solid rate now. So the data I'm seeing from our clinical trials, there's no doubt that these substances are safe to use under medical protocols. They have a lower side effect profile than antidepressants and benzodiazepines, which are quite dangerous. And so we just need to progress the science and get through phase 2 trials in a way that's meaningful and profound. And then that we've obviously got to get through phase 3 and the FDA. Our approach will be to get these substances approved in New Zealand first. So we're on a pathway to that. As I said, if we get through phase 2 in an open label, we start seeing these signals in depression, lobbying the government very hard to get special access, simply because we have hundreds of people every week inundated with people asking, can I get these treatments? Where do I get LSD from? Do you sell it? And the answer is no. We're just doing research. But the need is, you can see the need, and being at kind of at the core of this science, we can see the demand, we can feel it from people that are trying to find it. So in Australia, for instance, if people want to find these substances, they're doing it illegally. Even foraging for mushrooms, if you go and pick a mushroom in the forest, that's illegal.
Right. It's just natural plants. But you're really looking at a laboratory development of LSD. I mean, it's developed in the lab, right? So from the viewpoint of looking at the underground, as you start talking about, and you doing microdosing, I bring this up because we know of like Compass, for example, which has been able to go ahead and take psychedelics, and they've been able to put a thumbprint on it, like Monsanto did on grain. Is there something specific that MindBio Therapeutics is doing that specifically makes it different, let's say, than if I went on the internet and I bought tabs of window pane or whatever, orange sunshine or whatever it is? I mean, what's the difference here between what you're doing and what someone else might do if they decided to hear the podcast and say, oh, I think that's a good idea, let me go ahead and find out about it and try it myself? So I'm just trying to understand the efficacy around, because we do know in the States, if you go out and you buy street drugs, a lot of times they're laced with fentanyl or some other chemicals. You don't know what you're getting. I mean, there's no purity aspect to it. So can you speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is a real issue here. So it's dawned on me that the data we have basically says this: if you're a healthy male, you microdose LSD, and it is LSD in the form that we've given it to patients every few days under that protocol, you're going to feel better. You're going to feel well. You're going to have more energy, more creative. You're going to feel more socially connected. and so forth. And so that's really interesting information to be sending out to the world, and certainly it's confirmatory of what people have been saying in the microdosing community. However, you are right in saying that this sort of people who are out accessing these medicines in the underground, they don't know what they're taking. So we're really an advocate for, obviously, the scientific process here and just the discovery work, and certainly it is safe under the protocols we're testing, and we really want to obviously we want to develop a controlled medicine that can be given under controlled circumstances. LSD is not without its dangers, right? And we need to understand these substances can change the way the brain works, and certainly there are some problems we've seen that need to be addressed in when people take even microdoses of LSD. A certain subset of participants in the trials experience a certain level of jitteriness or a mild anxiety, like they've had too many coffees. And so much so we've had to withdraw some of those people from the trials. So it's not without its problems. And, my attitude to this is to just keep pushing the science hard. We want to know. We don't want to obstruct any of the information. We want to get access to the information so that when we're at the point where we're trying to introduce these medicines to the medical community, we've got all the data and it's undisputable. I think that's very important in the pharmaceutical process.
Right. Good. So one of the things I heard there, and I was looking for that, that point. So, I was going to ask you about, the danger in terms of it being abused if it was becoming more widely available. But it sounds to me like you're really talking about using it within a clinical setting, bringing together the therapeutic elements of set setting and integration as a part of that. And in a lot of cases, the recreational stuff, it's going to be there. The underground's going to be there and abuse is going to happen. But you're really focused in on the medical community, if I understand that correctly, right?
Yeah, that's correct. That's right. So, it's thanks to the people that have been doing this for decades that we sort of understood that it was doing something. We set out to test that thesis, and we've now proven it. And so we can happily say that LSD is safe to take in microdoses, and that it works in a certain way in the brain. It's got a good effect on mood. But yeah, our approach really is to just keep getting at the science and to digging up the data. And we've still got a long way to go, Keith. It's still this is a real marathon, this process, but it's looking very promising, and it's very exciting for people that are suffering from all these conditions that are hoping we'll come up with something that's going to work for them. It's quite heartbreaking to talk to people that are suffering from mental health conditions, and they've tried everything. It's affecting their life in ways that that's quite damaging, and this is offering real hope to them. And what those people are doing now is they're reaching out to the mycologists and the places around the world where they can access these substances, which is a great shame. The governments need to sort of take notice of this, which they're doing, and we're slowly seeing sort of the rules change and decriminalisation and so forth. Even in the last 3 years that I've been involved in this work, that environment has certainly changed. I didn't really know what to say about decriminalisation 3 years ago. I've got a lot more to say about it now, and certainly the more data we see, we can see that these substances, the reason why people are taking them is very positive.
Right. So, and one of the things that really attracted me to, after we met over at Wonderland, it was really understanding that you really have a lot of values. Your company seems to have a lot of values around bringing in the indigenous population, really understanding the history around these psychedelics and around the use of psychedelics. Can you speak to that a little bit more in terms of how you bring in the indigenous population to your overall planning, if you will, as I understand it?
Yes, well, this process is really quite special that we're seeing, and it's a real credit to our scientific team. So what happens in clinical science, particularly in the early stages in phase 1, there are certain communities and certain, so for instance, women are excluded from our phase 1 trials. Generally, that's done to get a baseline. So women are unrepresented in this early sort of stage clinical research, and also Indigenous communities appear to be underrepresented. And so we are a culprit of both of those things in our phase 1 clinical trials.
Both women and Indigenous. Both the women and
right.
the Indigenous populations are included in your trials, yeah?
In the phase 1, we're a culprit of this. They are both underrepresented. So it's just 80 healthy men went through the phase 1 trials.
Got it.
And there was a small cohort of Indigenous, the Maori community were included in the trials. But what we realised is that that's not representative of things. And so certainly in phase 2, we introduce women and female sex at birth into the trials, and also we're aware of the profound mental health issues that experienced by Indigenous communities all around the world. It's the same, and so it's that mental health crisis is kind of amplified, we're finding, in Australia and New Zealand. And so what we're doing in the clinical trials is we're engaging with the Indigenous elders. We're bringing in cultural aspects into the clinical trials. We're adding in specialist psychometric tests and that have been designed to talk in a way that's meaningful to the Maori community, and even to the point where the clinical trial rooms, the laboratories, are being blessed by these communities. And so this engagement, I think, is important, right? And this inclusive engagement, and that's what I find very positive about what our team are doing with this research.
That's lovely, and that's really very, very, very important. So it seems to me that you're really trailblazing new areas, and you're really having a very, very open mind about where the company is going. Any other challenges that you think MindBio Therapeutics has in the future in terms of bringing your products to market? And, how do people find out about the company?
Yeah, so the main challenge that we're at is trying to solve this mental health crisis that we're really facing, and that's certainly that burden. I feel that burden being at the helm of this organisation, and I think it's our responsibility to bring the science forward as quickly as we can to prove that everything that people have been saying about these medicines have been saying for decades. We just need to bring the proof forward, and then once we've got the proof, we need to make them accessible as soon as we can, so that we can start changing people's lives. We're accessible. I'm best followed on LinkedIn, and do a lot of my communications are there. And as you said, Keith, we are going to float the company on the Canadian Securities Exchange early next year. We've got a shareholder vote in late December on that process, and that's very exciting, I think, because that kind of puts us on the global stage. It broadens our access to investors in the sector. It certainly gives my team and myself a sort of a platform that we can kind of use our voices to change mental health for good, and that's what we're here to do.
Right. Well, that's lovely. And I signed up on the company's website. That's MindBio Therapeutics. So I'm really hoping to go ahead and get some information about the company, be on the newsletter, which I've already started to get some notices. And let me ask you, before you float or after you float the company, are you heading over to Peru to go ahead and expand your mind and expand your experience a little bit? Is that anywhere in your plan, Justin?
Well, I certainly I've found social media, and my 4 teenage young adult children are quite outraged about it, and I'd love to film some of these experiences and participate in these ceremonies. I think they are just wonderful. I've just watched Daniel Castillo's video, which was just quite beautiful, really, and very brave for what they're doing with veterans. So I am very curious. I'd like to go and see those places, and certainly I'm open to invitations.
Oh, good. Well, certainly, as you know, I'm a member of the Heroic Hearts Project, working with veterans, and really very much open to the same thing. So we need to stay in touch, and certainly I look forward to learning more about your company. You're a rock solid guy, and you're really involved in a real incredible area, which I'm involved with as well. One final thing. Do you think that from the viewpoint of microdosing, individuals have a more mindful attitude? And, this is the Mindfulness Experience Podcast. So I'm just wondering your view in terms of, does, like Paul Stamets says, does microdosing LSD, does it really help create a kinder, gentler society and kinder, gentler people, in your view?
Well, absolutely. The data shows us that people feel more socially connected, and this concept of social connectivity is a theme that runs right throughout the psychedelics community. Mm-hmm. People feel closer with one another, and that can only be a good thing if we can create more of that.
Great. Well, listen, Justin, thank you so much for coming on the show. Again, MindBio Therapeutics, Justin Hanka. That's Hanka. You can find him on LinkedIn. And I hope you have a great day. It's early in the day over there in Australia, right?
Certainly is. Thank you, Keith. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure as well, Justin. Thank you for listening to the Mindfulness Experience Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. We have other exciting guests coming up in the next few weeks, so stay tuned. For more mindfulness tips and tricks, visit our website at workmindfulness.com. Thanks again for being a part of the Mindfulness Experience. This is Keith Fivesen.